If you want to find love, you have to learn to be alone. Most people are not looking for love, they are looking for an exit from being alone, an exit from silence, an exit from sitting with themselves long enough to find out who they actually are. And call that exit love. And this is what I want to talk about today because I think it's the reason so many relationships fail before they even start. You cannot build a healthy relationship on an exit plan, on an escape plan. And here's what I see happening constantly. Someone gets out of a relationship, or they have never really been into one, and being alone starts to feel unbearable. And not because solitude is actually unbearable, but because they have never sat in it long enough to find out what's there. So the second someone shows interest, they're all in. Not because that person is right for them, because that person is available. And availability gets mistaken for compatibility constantly. You're not choosing them, you're choosing relief. And relief is not same as love. Why alone feels so hard? Let's be honest about it. Because it's so unbearable for some, or for many people. It's not the silence that's the problem. It's the silence what it reveals when you're alone, really alone, when there is no distraction, no one to perform for. Everything you have been avoiding shows up. The grief you didn't process, the self worth questions that you buried under busyness, the patterns you have never looked at because you were always too occupied with someone else's chaos to look at than yours. Being alone forces you to meet yourself. A lot of people have never met themselves, so they avoid it at all costs. They fill every silence with a relationship, a situationship, a text thread, anything that keeps them from sitting with themselves, just their own thoughts. And you know what? Here's the cost of skipping that step. You end up in relationships where you don't even know what you want because you never figured that out alone. You just took whoever showed up. You end up tolerating things that you shouldn't tolerate because the alternative of being alone again feels worse than the mistreatment. You end up losing yourself inside someone else because you never had a strong sense of yourself to begin with. You build your identity around being chosen and not around who you actually are. And then when that relationship ends, and a lot of them do, you're right back where you started, alone. Except now more depleted than before. Same pattern, different people, but same outcome. I'm not telling you to swear off relationships. I'm not telling you to isolate yourself for a year before you are allowed to date again. I'm telling you to get comfortable in your own company before you let someone else into it. That means eating alone without feeling pathetic about it. That may mean spending a Friday night by yourself without scrolling for someone to fill in that space. That means making decisions about your life without needing someone else's validation first. It means sitting with that boredom, sitting with grief, sitting with the quiet questions about who you are when no one is watching you. Because here's what happens when you do that: you stop needing someone to complete you, and you start choosing someone because you actually want them, not because you needed an exit. That's the difference between desperation and desire. Here's what actually changes everything. When you know how to be alone, you choose differently. You don't settle for almost right because almost right is better than nothing. Because nothing doesn't scare you anymore. You don't ignore red flags because you're terrified of being single again. Because being single isn't a threat anymore. It's just a state you know how to live in. You don't lose yourself trying to keep someone because you already have yourself. That was never up for negotiation. People who are comfortable alone bring a completely different energy into relationships. They're not grasping, they're not performing, they're not auditioning for love. They're simply choosing from a place of wholeness and not lack of something. And that energy attracts an entirely different kind of person. Now, this is what I want you to hear. If you have spent years jumping from one relationship to the next, never quite alone, never quite settled, never quite sure who you are without someone else in the picture, I want you to hear this, that you're not broken and you're not too needy. Definitely, you're not asking for too much. You just never learned how to be alone. Nobody taught you that solitude could feel safe, that your own company could be enough, that you don't need an escape plan from yourself. But you can learn it starting from now, not by avoiding relationships forever, just by getting strong enough in your own presence that you stop entering relationships out of fear. If you want to find love, real love, the one that lasts, the kind that doesn't require you to disappear inside it, learn to be alone first. Not because being alone is the goal, because the person you become in that aloneness, steady, whole, no longer running for yourself, that's the person who finally knows how to choose well. And that's the person worth loving. I'm AK. This is Silence Between Coffee. See you in the next one.